After their father's mysterious death, two estranged brothers uncover a deadly conspiracy involving crime lords, corruption, and a hidden fortune. With enemies on every side, they must reunite and fight back. This is the Wrecking Crew. Let's begin. In the crowded streets of Chinatown, a seasoned private investigator named Walter senses trouble long before he sees it. A shadow lingers behind him, footsteps matching his pace. Trusting his instincts, he quickens his stride. Without breaking rhythm, he slips a small parcel into a nearby mailbox, as if completing an ordinary errand. But the moment he steps off the curb, fate strikes. A speeding van barrels toward him, leaving no time to react. The impact throws him onto the pavement. As the vehicle disappears into traffic, Walter lies motionless, blood pooling beneath him while strangers gather in shock. Far away in Hawaii, Navy Commander James pushes his team to their limits during an underwater endurance drill. One by one, his men surface gasping for air. But James remains submerged longer than any of them. When he finally rises, he reprimands them sharply. Discipline is everything. His lecture is cut short when a serviceman approaches with urgent news. The police are on the line. Soon after, James stands in the cold silence of a morgue, staring at his father's lifeless body. The officers explain that Walter's death appears to have been caused by a concealed driver who fled the scene. James listens without visible grief, his face unreadable, his posture rigid. That evening, life moves on, at least on the surface. Back home, James prepares dinner as though it were any other day. When his wife, Isla, gently asks how things went, he talks about training exercises and, almost casually, mentions that Walter is dead, referring to him by name rather than Dad. Isla suggests informing his brother. James hesitates. Years of silence stand between them. He won't answer. James says flatly, convinced the distance is too great to bridge. Meanwhile, in Oklahoma, James's half-brother Johnny faces his own unraveling world. He walks into a room to find his girlfriend, Valentina, packing her belongings. She's made up her mind. She's leaving. And just like that, the fragile pieces of his life begin to fall apart. It was supposed to be a special day, Valentina's birthday, but Johnny forgot. For her, that was the last crack in a relationship already hanging by a thread. Johnny drifted through life like it was a joke that never ended. Responsibilities slipped through his fingers. Promises meant little, and seriousness wasn't in his vocabulary. Valentina had carried the weight for too long. When he realized his mistake, Johnny begged. He swore he would change, swore he would grow up. For a moment, she leaned in and kissed him softly, almost forgiving. Then she slapped him across the face, a sharp punctuation mark at the end of their story, and walked out the door. Alone and humiliated, Johnny did what he did best. He reached for a bottle. Hours blurred as he drank, trying to drown regret in cheap liquor. That's when his phone rang. It was Isla. Her voice was calm but heavy. Walter was dead. The funeral would be tomorrow. Johnny barely reacted. He muttered that he wouldn't be coming and shuffled into the bathroom, half listening, half bragging about his latest police work as if it mattered. Then everything changed. Two strangers appeared behind him in the mirror. Before he could react, cold steel pressed against his throat. Startled, Johnny jerked and, in his panic, embarrassed himself. The men didn't laugh. They were there for something specific. A package Walter had mailed. Johnny had no idea what they were talking about. He hadn't seen Walter since he was a kid. The men rolled up their sleeves, revealing matching tattoos, proof they belonged to a ruthless crime syndicate. They promised to end his life if the package didn't surface. Johnny shifted gears. He whimpered, pleaded, acted terrified. Then he exploded. The bathroom became a war zone. He slammed one attacker into the sink, hurled another into the wall, and shattered the door in the chaos. A third gunman stormed in, firing shots that splintered wood and tile. Johnny dove for cover as bullets tore through the room. One of the earlier attackers staggered back to his feet, just in time for Johnny to hurl him into the broken doorway, jamming it shut and trapping the shooter. Johnny punched through the cracked wood, striking blindly but effectively. Furniture turned into weapons. Bottles became projectiles. In the middle of the madness, Johnny even paused to take a swig of alcohol, as if this was just another wild night. One by one, he dropped them, but the final thug crossed a line. He stumbled into the living area and smashed Johnny's small shrine dedicated to his mother. Something in Johnny snapped. He grabbed a metal grater from the kitchen and dragged it viciously across the man's arm. The scream that followed echoed through the apartment. Johnny smashed the thug's face into a table and struck him from behind, teeth scattering across the floor. Amid the wreckage, Johnny noticed a folded note lying on the same table. Valentina's handwriting. Thanks for nothing. The fight wasn't over. One of the mobsters lunged again, nearly choking the life out of him. Desperate, Johnny twisted free and hurled the man onto shattered glass, ending the struggle in a spray of crimson. Breathing heavily, surrounded by destruction, Johnny picked up a framed photo of his mother holding him as a child. Hidden behind it was another picture, Walter. Johnny stared at his father's face, anger burning in his eyes. Then he muttered an insult to the dead man, unaware that whatever Walter had set in motion was only just beginning. The following morning, the funeral draws more than grieving relatives. Among the black suits and solemn faces, James quietly observes something unsettling. Members of the Japanese underworld and rival syndicate figures have shown up to pay their respects. Their presence feels less like mourning and more like unfinished business. He's even more surprised when Johnny appears. The reunion is anything but warm. The brothers lock eyes and years of resentment ignite instantly. Insults fly in sharp whispers until the priest is forced to interrupt, reminding them where they stand. For a brief moment, silence returns. After the final prayer, Walter's ashes are placed on a small boat and pushed out toward the open sea, drifting away with the tide. Later, Johnny wanders through the old family house. Now James is home once again. Memories cling to the walls. It's here that the truth lingers openly. Walter's betrayal years ago shattered the family. He had an affair, and Johnny was the result. Though James's mother chose grace over bitterness and allowed Johnny into her home, James never truly accepted him. To him, Johnny was a living reminder of everything that broke apart. At lunch, the tension thickens when Governor Peter joins the table. Invited because Johnny's half-sister Nanny works closely with him. Polite conversation barely masks the strain underneath. Then Johnny makes his real reason clear. He didn't come to mourn. He came for answers. He wants to find out who killed Walter. James remains firm. According to official reports, it was a covert drone strike, an unfortunate, precise accident. Case closed. Johnny shakes his head and recounts the violent attack from the night before. The armed men demanding a mysterious package Walter had mailed before his death. The table erupts in argument. James accuses Johnny of dragging chaos wherever he goes. Johnny fires back, reminding James that when his own mother was murdered years ago, his perfect brother did nothing. That accusation lands hard. For a second, James says nothing. Then he quietly asks Johnny to step outside. On the beach, waves crashing behind them, the confrontation continues. James refuses to entertain conspiracy theories. To him, their father's death was tragic but accidental. Johnny sees something darker at play. Frustrated and furious, Johnny makes a crude gesture and storms off, leaving his brother standing alone with the tide. That night, at a dimly lit bar, Johnny runs into an old acquaintance, Akai, now a loyal member of a powerful crime syndicate. The reunion is cautious. Akai delivers a message. His boss, a man known only as Mr. K, wants to meet. Johnny doesn't hesitate. He's not interested. Johnny barely has time to process Akai's words before the room begins to spin. The laughter around him grows distant. His vision blurs. That's when he understands. Something was slipped into his drink. A sedative. His body goes heavy, and darkness swallows him whole. When he wakes, he's no longer in the bar. He's seated in a quiet, dimly lit room. Across from him sits a calm, but dangerous man known only as Mr. K. There's no need for introductions. Power radiates from him. Mr. K speaks smoothly, reminding Johnny of the many syndicate members he has injured over the years. Johnny doesn't deny it. He says he had his reasons. The syndicate was responsible for his mother's death. To him, every punch thrown was justice. Mr. K listens without emotion. Then he makes a simple demand. Leave the islands. Johnny refuses. The response is immediate. Mr. K slams him onto a table and, with chilling precision, carves his own initial into the skin of Johnny's neck. A permanent warning. 7 days. That's the deadline. If Johnny is still around after that, the syndicate will finish what they started. Elsewhere, James takes a quieter approach. He visits Detective Renard and asks to review the official report on Walter's death. Renard doesn't object, but admits there's little to find. The incident occurred in a neighborhood where silence is law. No witnesses. No cooperation. The only security camera nearby wasn't working. Authorities have already concluded it was a strike from a concealed drone. With that explanation accepted, the case is practically closed. James collects his father's personal belongings from the station. A knife, a wallet, and a small ticket with a strange list of words scribbled on it. Something about it feels deliberate. At the same time, Johnny takes matters into his own hands. He breaks into Walter's old apartment, searching for anything that might explain the chaos. Inside a desk drawer, he finds a handgun. He keeps it. Suddenly, he hears movement. Someone else has entered. Johnny slips into the shadows as a man begins rifling through the papers on the desk. When Johnny lunges to grab him, the intruder reacts fast. smashing a plate into Johnny's face before bolting for the window. The chase spills outside. The stranger leaps across rooftops and scrambles over parked cars in a desperate escape. But when he lands on the main street below, Johnny is already waiting. One solid punch ends the run. Later, in a bar booth under dim lights, Johnny demands answers. The captured man, who introduces himself as Pa, claims he once worked for Walter. He says Walter treated him like a son. According to Pa, Walter had more enemies than friends, and his final assignment involved a catering company. Pa had been placed there undercover as a waiter, though he never understood why. Johnny listens carefully. Then he makes a decision. From now on, Pa works for him. To seal the arrangement, Johnny grabs Pa's crooked, possibly broken nose and forcefully snaps it back into place, ignoring the scream that follows. The partnership begins with pain. James returns to the exact stretch of road where his father was struck. He crouches near the curb, studying the faint tire impressions baked into the asphalt. The pattern doesn't sit right with him. His eyes drift upward, and that's when he notices a surveillance camera mounted above the entrance of a nearby adult store. Inside, neon lights flicker against dusty shelves. James approaches the owner calmly at first, offering cash in exchange for access to the security footage from the night of the incident. The man refuses, nervous and defensive. James' patience evaporates. In one swift movement, he grabs the clerk and painfully tears at his facial piercings, forcing cooperation the hard way. Meanwhile, Johnny and Pa are back inside Walter's apartment, searching for anything overlooked. In a corner, they find a surfboard. Pa casually mentions that Walter never surfed a day in his life. That detail sparks something. Johnny examines the board more closely and notices one of the fins is slightly misaligned. When he pulls at it, a hidden compartment opens. Rolled papers spill onto the floor, technical blueprints. Johnny immediately calls his half-sister Nanny. He tells her the documents carry an official government seal connected to Governor Peter. Nanny promises to quietly search the database for any match. Before they can process the discovery, the front door suddenly slams inward, striking Pa and knocking him aside. James storms in with his weapon drawn. Johnny reacts instantly, aiming his own gun back at him. For a tense second, the brothers stand face to face, fingers tight on triggers. Then they realize the truth. They're chasing the same answers. Weapons lower. James produces a flash drive containing the footage he obtained from the shop. They play it. The van that killed Walter appears clearly, but there's no license plate. Even more disturbing, the driver never swerves or hesitates. The impact looks intentional. Johnny is convinced it was deliberate. James still wants stronger proof. They send Pa to dig deeper into the catering company tied to Walter's last job. Then the brothers head out together, tension thick inside the car. As they argue, neither notices a large vehicle creeping from around the corner. The collision is violent. The larger car rams them and keeps pushing, metal grinding against metal as they're forced down the street. Other vehicles crash trying to avoid the chaos. Suddenly, gunfire erupts from inside the attacking vehicle. Johnny slams the accelerator, trying to break free, but he plows through outdoor restaurant tables, sending chairs and plates flying. The two cars remain locked together, trapped in a deadly dance. Johnny fires at the attacker's windows, but the bullets bounce uselessly off reinforced glass. James leans out and takes careful aim. One precise shot drops the gunman inside. He tries to line up another target, but his weapon clicks empty. Out of options, Johnny shoots at his own damaged door, forcing it open, and leaps onto the street. He runs while firing behind him, civilians screaming and scattering in every direction. James finds extra ammunition inside the car. Instead of retreating, he climbs through the window and launches himself onto the attacker's vehicle. He empties rounds into the windshield, but it won't crack. Then Johnny changes strategy. He lowers his aim and fires at the engine block. Sparks burst. The vehicle loses control. A split second later, it explodes in a roar of fire and twisted steel, flipping across the pavement. James is thrown clear, crashing hard onto the road as the wreckage burns behind him. The street falls into stunned silence. The brothers' victory on the street doesn't feel like one for long. At the police station, Detective Renard explodes the moment they walk in. He slams files onto his desk and demands to know what they were thinking. Multiple vehicles wrecked, civilians injured, an explosion in broad daylight. Then he drops another truth. Johnny hasn't officially been on duty for 2 months. He was suspended and is under internal investigation for using excessive force. The badge he once carried now hangs by a thread. James tries to shift the focus. He hands over the flash drive containing the suspicious footage of the van, the missing license plate, the deliberate impact. He urges Renard to reopen the case. Renard barely glances at it. According to the department, Walter's death was already ruled an accident involving a covert drone. The paperwork is closed. He tells them both to stop stirring trouble and start behaving before they make things worse for themselves. That evening, the investigation takes a different turn. Nanny gathers the brothers and pulls up the information she quietly accessed through the government system. The blueprints they found hidden inside the surfboard aren't random sketches. They belong to a large property planned for the east side of the island. The project was commissioned by a wealthy businessman named Marcus, a global entrepreneur who owns luxury resorts across multiple countries. But there's something else. On the back of the blueprints is an embossed seal with unfamiliar wording: Sacred Casino Princess. The phrase sends a chill through the room. Gambling is strictly illegal on the island. A casino operating in secret would mean corruption at the highest level. The pieces begin to align. Walter's last job with a catering company, the hidden documents, the syndicate interest, the suspicious death. They reach a silent agreement. Marcus is hosting his annual charity fundraiser the following night. If answers exist, they'll be there. The following morning, tension lingers between the brothers, but so do questions. James finally asks what really happened with Johnny's suspension. Johnny doesn't dodge it. He admits he shot a street dealer who was pushing drugs to teenagers. The department called it excessive force. Johnny calls it necessary. For once, James doesn't argue. Later, they drive to the location marked on the secret blueprints, the place where the so-called casino project was supposed to rise. But instead of cranes and concrete, they find something else entirely. It's an old Hawaiian village, home to a local community that has lived there for generations. Wooden houses, fishing boats, children playing barefoot in the sand. This isn't empty land, it's heritage. If someone plans to build there, it won't just be construction, it'll be displacement. Just then, Johnny's phone rings. It's Pa. He tells them the police have pulled a blue van from the ocean. The brothers rush to the scene. Divers and officers crowd the shoreline. The van is heavily damaged and plateless. Worse, a body was recovered nearby, a government accountant. Now it's no longer just about their father. Detective Renard arrives with paperwork in hand, a list of every registered blue van on the island. The brothers scan it quickly, trying to memorize details. Johnny attempts to keep the document, but Renard snatches it back and warns them again to stay out of it. Once the detective leaves, Johnny recalls something. Among all the vehicle registrations, only one name stood out: Hayashi Imports. He asks Pa to dig into it. Hours later, the annual fundraiser is in full swing. Wealthy guests mingle beneath chandeliers, while servers glide through the crowd with silver trays. Pa is already inside, posing as staff, and he has secured extra uniforms so James and Johnny can blend in. Before they split up, Pa confirms what he found. Hayashi Imports is tied directly to the Yakuza. The brothers separate to avoid attention. James finds himself serving a well-dressed man named Nakamura. Calm and composed, Nakamura casually sprinkles a fine white powder onto his meal before eating, a detail James doesn't miss. While clearing the plate, James quietly lifts a credit card resting beside it. The name printed on it reads, Hayashi Imports. He steps forward moments later, pretending to have found the card on the floor. As he returns it, he casually asks whether Hayashi Imports recently misplaced a blue van. Nakamura's polite smile tightens. He doesn't answer directly, but the threat in his eyes is unmistakable. Across the ballroom, Johnny strikes up a conversation with a woman named Monica. The moment she hears his surname, her expression changes. She knew Walter. After Johnny explains his father's death, Monica lowers her voice. She reveals she is married to Marcus, the powerful businessman behind the East Side development, and she wants out. Divorce isn't simple when your husband controls everything. So she hired Walter to gather leverage, something strong enough to protect her when she files. But without that leverage, she fears she won't be safe. She refuses to say more in public and invites Johnny to meet her privately at her penthouse the next day. Before Johnny can respond further, armed security closes in. The brothers are escorted, not politely, to a private room. Inside waits Marcus. He greets them calmly, claiming he hired Walter for discreet work and paid him generously for his silence. When told that Walter is dead, Marcus appears genuinely surprised, or is very good at pretending to be. The game, it seems, is far bigger than either brother expected. Johnny doesn't believe a word Marcus says. The moment they're alone, he accuses the businessman outright. He's convinced Marcus had Walter eliminated. Marcus' calm facade cracks for the first time. He fires back angrily, insisting he had no reason to kill the detective. According to them, Walter was hired for something far more personal, to find out whether Monica was being unfaithful. She wasn't, Marcus says coldly. While the tension thickens, Johnny's wandering hands discover something dangerous on the desk, a grenade. He casually toys with it, forcing Marcus' guards to stiffen. At the same time, James' attention shifts elsewhere. On a nearby napkin rests something horrifying: 2 severed fingers. Marcus quickly covers them and signals for the meeting to end. The brothers are thrown off the property without answers. After they leave, Marcus stares at a framed photo of Monica, suspicion creeping into his expression. He quietly wonders what she may have set in motion behind his back. The next day, Johnny arrives at Monica's penthouse, expecting a private conversation. Instead, he finds flashing lights, ambulances, police tape, a crowd whispering. He pushes forward and sees her body sprawled across the roof of a car below the balcony. Authorities claim she fell. Johnny doesn't. Rage takes over. He storms back to Marcus' mansion and begins tearing through the security detail. One guard drops, then another. He fights like a man who has nothing left to lose, absorbing blows and delivering worse in return. But numbers win. A surge of electricity from a taser finally brings him to his knees. Marcus steps forward, composed as ever. Johnny, barely conscious, accuses him again of killing Monica. Marcus denies it once more and orders his men to call the police. A final kick to the head knocks Johnny out. He wakes behind bars. Later, he receives an unexpected visitor, Governor Peter. Calm and measured, Peter explains that Marcus has agreed to drop the charges. Johnny will be released. Peter urges him to step back and let the authorities handle the investigation. He reflects on Walter, describing him as a man who always carried darkness inside. Then he looks at Johnny and says he sees that same darkness in both brothers. Walter faced it alone. They shouldn't. When Johnny walks free, James is waiting outside. Instead of relief, he offers criticism. Violence won't fix the past. It won't bring their mother back. That's the wrong thing to say. Johnny snaps. Without warning, he headbutts James and swings. The two crash into parked police cars, denting metal and shattering windows. Officers shout, but neither brother listens. The fight spills into the mud nearby. Years of resentment pour out through fists and blood. Eventually, James gains control, pinning Johnny down and landing blow after blow until the struggle fades. Breathing hard, Johnny looks up at him. What kind of man sends his little brother away when he needs him most? He demands, referring to the day James forced him to leave years ago. James' voice softens for the first time. He says he didn't abandon him. He protected him. The syndicate had marked Johnny for death. Sending him away was the only way to keep him alive. Johnny's anger cracks. He confesses that he's never escaped the image of their mother's lifeless body. After she died, James was the only family he had left. And when he was sent away, he felt truly alone. For the first time since Walter's death, the fight between them isn't about enemies or conspiracies. It's about pain neither of them ever learned how to face. For the first time in years, James finally lowers his pride. Standing in the mud, bruised and exhausted, he understands the damage he caused by pushing his brother away. Quietly, he apologizes. It isn't dramatic, but it's real. That fragile truce doesn't last long. Back at the house, Johnny receives an unexpected call from Valentina. She returned to his old place to collect her mail and found the mysterious package Walter had sent before his death. Inside is a flash drive. Johnny immediately asks her to bring it to Hawaii. At the airport, he waits with open arms, hoping for reconciliation. Valentina steps through the terminal, locks eyes with him, and throws her suitcase straight at his chest instead. Some wounds don't heal overnight. Soon they're all crammed into a car, James driving, Johnny in the passenger seat, Pa in the back with his laptop, and Valentina fuming beside them. Pa plugs in a flash drive, only to hit a heavy digital barrier. A secure banking firewall blocks access. Valentina leans forward, studies the interface, and quickly recognizes what they're looking at. It's a cold wallet, she explains. An offline cryptocurrency vault, highly encrypted. The drive itself isn't the money, it's the key. Whoever wants it isn't after data. They're after access to a hidden fortune. To unlock it, the system requires a passphrase made up of 12 random words. James suddenly remembers the strange ticket he found inside Walter's wallet. He hands it to Pa. The words match the format perfectly. Before they can test it, gunfire erupts from above. A helicopter swoops into view, spraying bullets across the road. Windows shatter. Metal sparks. James struggles to control the steering wheel as he swerves through traffic. To make matters worse, vehicles ahead are struck and forced to block their escape route. Johnny leans out the window, firing back, but the chopper keeps its distance. Switch seats. Valentina shouts. Reluctantly, James lets her take the wheel, and she drives like someone born for chaos. She accelerates hard, weaving around wrecked cars with impossible precision. The helicopter circles, then pulls away, only for two armed men on a motorcycle to race into view, guns blazing. Valentina jerks the car into a sharp turn and suddenly throws it into reverse, speeding backward down the road. Johnny fires repeatedly but can't land a hit. Then Valentina does something insane. She slams the brakes intentionally. The motorcycle crashes into them. The riders fly forward, landing on the hood and roof. Before anyone can recover, she floors the accelerator again. One attacker crawls across the roof, blades in hand, slicing toward the back window. He smashes through and climbs inside, reaching for Pa's laptop. James lunges at him, grappling inside the cramped space. Meanwhile, the second man clings to the hood. Johnny fights him through the windshield, landing punches until an oncoming truck forces him back into his seat. Valentina swerves violently, trying to shake the man hanging from the door. He fires his weapon wildly, striking her in the head with it. Johnny grabs the attacker's arm, redirecting the gunfire. Valentina veers dangerously close to a roadside fence. Metal screeches. The enemy's arm becomes trapped between steel and wire until it tears free. His body tumbles onto the pavement behind them. Inside the car, James forces the other attacker halfway out the door and drags his head along the asphalt before hurling him into traffic. Civilian vehicles swerve and collide behind them. For a split second, there's silence. Valentina leans over and kisses Johnny, half adrenaline, half relief. Then the helicopter returns. Bullets rain down again. This time, both brothers fire in unison. James steadies his aim and lands a clean shot on the gunner. The body collapses backward, stray bullets striking the pilot. The helicopter spirals out of control. It crashes onto the roadway in a fiery explosion, just as Valentina slams the car into a tunnel entrance, shielding them from the blast. Flames roar behind them. Inside the tunnel, the car speeds forward, damaged, battered, but still moving. And now, there's no turning back. When the chaos finally settles, the group pulls over in a quiet stretch away from the city. Hands still shaking, Pa connects the flash drive again and carefully enters the 12-word passphrase from Walter's ticket. This time, the firewall unlocks. Numbers begin scrolling across the screen. Encrypted accounts, offshore transfers, annual deposits. One figure freezes them all. $12 million every year, redirected into accounts connected to Governor Peter. Silence fills the car. The pattern becomes clear. Marcus wanted gambling legalized on the island to open his secret casino project. To do that, he needed political approval. Peter, it seems, was being paid to make it happen. The Yakuza provided protection and muscle to keep everything quiet. Walter hadn't died because of a jealous husband. He had uncovered corruption at the highest level. The government accountant whose body was found near the van likely supplied Walter with financial proof. Once Peter realized the leak, he erased everyone who knew too much. At the same time, Nanny meets privately with Peter, presenting him with copies of the suspicious blueprints. She hints that Marcus might not be the respectable businessman he claims to be. Peter plays surprised. He takes the documents, thanks her for her diligence, and promises to review the projects personally. His calm expression hides everything. Back at home, James walks into something worse than gunfire. The house is too quiet. He calls out for Isla. No answer. He dials her phone, only to hear it ringing from the living room floor. Panic sets in. He searches every room until he finds his children locked inside the bathroom, trembling. They tell him masked men took their mother. James pulls them into his arms, fighting to stay composed. He assures them it isn't their fault. Then his phone buzzes. A video message. On the screen, Isla and Nanny are bound and tied in a dim basement. Behind the camera stands Marcus. He makes the terms simple. Bring the flash drive. Trade it for their lives. James' restraint disappears. He opens his secured weapons case without hesitation. Rifles, ammunition, tactical gear. Johnny arms himself just as heavily. There's no more arguing between them, only purpose. By nightfall, the brothers approach Marcus' estate. Two guards patrol the outer gate. Silenced shots cut through the darkness. The guards fall before they can react. The brothers move across the yard like shadows, coordinated without speaking. More security waits in the garden and along the walls. But one by one, they are taken down quietly. The mansion looms ahead. Inside are the women they love, and the men responsible for everything. The assault on the mansion unfolds like a carefully planned storm. Outside, one of Marcus' luxury cars suddenly shatters, its window blown apart. The nearby guards cautiously approach the vehicle and find a note taped inside the broken glass. Smile. A second later, shots ring out. Johnny emerges from the shadows, dropping the guards one by one with precise, controlled fire from a distant vantage point. James provides sniper cover, scanning the upper floors for movement. He spots a guard on the first floor and takes the shot, but the bullet slams uselessly against reinforced glass. The impact alerts the man inside. As the guard slides the window open to investigate, James fires again, this time clean and lethal. Inside the mansion, lights suddenly flicker out. Darkness swallows the halls. Marcus, now uneasy, orders one of his basement guards to check the power. The man heads outside and quickly discovers the cables have been deliberately severed. He radios Marcus to report sabotage. Then he turns around. Bodies float silently in the illuminated swimming pool. Before he can react, Johnny steps from behind and drives a blade into his neck, catching the falling radio. Johnny calmly tells Marcus they'll be seeing him soon. Marcus responds by unleashing Nakamura and his armed men into the corridors. James intercepts them in a narrow hallway. The fight is brutal and close quarters. Gunfire flashes in tight spaces. Walls splinter. In minutes, James dismantles the group with ruthless efficiency. One gangster tries to flee, but James tackles him to the ground and begins smashing his head repeatedly with a hammer. Rage overtaking discipline. Johnny has to physically pull him back before he goes too far. With the path clear, the brothers reach the basement and find Isla and Nanny tied up but alive. They quickly free them and start guiding them towards safety. But Johnny stops. He isn't finished. He turns back, determined to settle things with Marcus personally. Isla insists she'll be safe and urges James to let Johnny handle it. Reluctantly, James stays behind to ensure the women escape. Moments later, James encounters Nakamura again in the basement corridors. A final confrontation begins. Gunfire erupts. Between shots, Nakamura inhales his strange white powder, fueling himself with manic energy. When his ammunition runs dry, he draws a sword and charges. James meets him in hand-to-hand combat. Fists, elbows, bone against bone. Spotting a heavy mace nearby, James grabs it and swings. The spiked head scrapes across Nakamura's face, tearing skin. With a violent twist, James snaps the man's arm, seizes the fallen sword, and drives the blade into him, ending the fight decisively. Outside, near the pier, Johnny finds Marcus attempting to escape on a boat. Johnny tackles him before he can cast off. The two crash onto the dock, trading punches, throwing tools, ropes, anything within reach. Marcus manages to grab a large hook and drives it into Johnny's shoulder, dragging him painfully across the wooden planks. Regaining his firearm, Marcus begins talking, ranting about power, ambition, and survival. He doesn't notice Johnny's hand tightening around something small, the grenade from Marcus' own desk. Marcus fires anyway, shooting Johnny and sending him stumbling into the water just as the grenade detonates. The explosion engulfs the boat in flames. James arrives at the pier in time to see his brother disappear beneath the surface. Without hesitation, he dives in. Seconds feel endless. Then both brothers break through the water together. They cling to the dock, watching the burning wreckage drift away. Marcus is gone. For the first time since their father's death, the fire consuming the pier isn't destruction, it's an ending. By morning, the fallout begins. Under flashing cameras and murmuring reporters, Detective Renard steps forward and places Governor Peter in handcuffs. The arrest happens in broad daylight. No secrecy. No quiet exit this time. The corruption that once hid behind polished speeches is finally exposed. Days later, the storm is past. The family gathers on the beach, where the waves roll in gently as if nothing violent ever touched the island. Photographs of those they've lost are placed carefully in the sand. Walter, their mother, and the others who were caught in the crossfire of greed and ambition. Johnny stands quietly in front of his mother's picture. For years, he avoided this place, avoided the memories, avoided the guilt. Now he kneels in the sand and apologizes, not just for staying away, but for letting anger define him. He promises to do better, to fight less, to love more, and to try again with Valentina. If she'll let him, peace feels close. Then a familiar presence approaches. Mr. K. He arrives without fear, without guards, almost casual. He admits something surprising. He never truly wanted Johnny gone. The threats, the pressure, the carved warning. It was all manipulation. By pushing Johnny into conflict with the Yakuza, Mr. K used him to eliminate his rivals. Now his syndicate stands alone on the island once more. As a gesture of appreciation, Mr. K hands Johnny a folded piece of paper. On it is a single name, the man responsible for their mother's murder. Revenge. Delivered neatly, Johnny stares at it for a long moment before showing it to James. James tells him he'll stand beside him if that's the road he chooses. But he also reminds Johnny of something important. Walter sent the flash drive to him for a reason, not just to expose corruption, but to bring him home, to bring the brothers back together. Johnny looks from the name on the paper to his family waiting on the shoreline. Slowly, he holds the paper over a small flame. It burns. Ash drifts into the wind, carrying years of rage with it. Johnny turns away from vengeance and walks back toward the people still standing beside him, toward Valentina, toward his brother. For the first time, he chooses a future instead of fight. And under the rising sun, the family begins again. If you enjoyed this recap of The Wrecking Crew, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more action-packed stories. See you in the next one.